Welcome to my new YouTube channel. Enjoy watching. I came into this world during what you might call the worst possible timing. My parents' marriage was already hanging by a thread, and my arrival didn't exactly help matters. I'm Charlotte, and my father Alfie wasn't exactly thrilled when Mom told him she was pregnant. "You planned this, didn't you, Sarah?" he shouted during one of their fights. "Got pregnant on purpose just to trap me here." I've heard this story so many times from Mom that I can almost see it playing out, even though I wasn't old enough to remember it myself. Mom always said Dad was too carefree, too irresponsible to be a real family man. He'd rather spend his paycheck on whatever caught his fancy than save for our future. Their arguments echoed through our small house for 5 long years after I was born. Sometimes they were about money, sometimes about Dad's late nights out, sometimes about me. It seemed like everything was a trigger for another explosive fight. When I turned 6, they finally made it official and got divorced. Dad didn't stick around to see how that worked out. He just vanished. No goodbye, no forwarding address, not a single child support payment. It was like he'd never existed except for the hole he left in our lives and Mom's growing bitterness. "Your father is nothing but a selfish coward," Mom would tell me whenever I asked about him. "A real man doesn't abandon his child." She'd get this hard look in her eyes every time his name came up, and eventually I learned to stop asking. The only connection I had left to Dad's side of the family was my grandmother Eleanor. She and Mom couldn't stand each other. Grandma Eleanor blamed Mom for the failed marriage, saying she'd pushed Dad away with her constant nagging about money and responsibility. Mom in turn couldn't even bear to be in the same room as Grandma. When it was time for my visits with Grandma Eleanor, Mom would drive me to her house, practically drop me at the doorstep, and leave without even stepping inside. But once inside, everything changed. Grandma Eleanor would wrap me in warm hugs and tell me stories about Dad when he was young. She'd run her fingers through my hair and smile softly. "You look just like your father, sweetheart." She'd say you have his eyes, his smile, even that little dimple. "When you laugh." 3 years passed in a blur of weekend visits to Grandma Eleanor's house filled with cookies, stories, and the warmth I couldn't find at home. By the time I turned 8, I had settled into a routine of sorts: weekdays with Mom, who was still bitter about Dad, and those precious weekends with Grandma who never stopped hoping he'd return. But everything changed. One rainy Tuesday in October, Mom got a call that made her face turn pale. "Get your coat, Charlotte," she said, her voice unusually quiet. "Grandma Eleanor wants to see us both. It's important." The drive to Grandma's house was different this time. Usually Mom would just drop me off and speed away, but today she parked the car and actually walked with me to the door. Something was wrong. I could feel it. In the heavy silence between us, Grandma Eleanor looked smaller, somehow lying in her bed with papers scattered around her. Her usually perfectly styled silver hair was messy, and her face had a grayish tinge that scared me, but she smiled when she saw us, reaching out her thin hands. "Sarah, Charlotte, thank you for coming," she said, her voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. "Please sit down, both of you." Mom actually sat down without argument, which was when I knew this was really serious. Grandma Einer's lawyer, Mr. Ezra, was there too, standing quietly in the corner like a somber statue. "I need to discuss something important," Grandma said, looking first at me, then at Mom. "I'm not well and I need to make sure everything is properly arranged." She paused to catch her breath. "My house and part of my savings will go to your Aunt Linda, Charlotte, but I've set up something special for you." I remember playing with the hem of my sweater, not really understanding what was happening. Adult conversations about arrangements and papers always bored me, but I knew I was supposed to pay attention. "I'm creating an educational fund for Charlotte." Grandma continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke about her plans. "It will cover her college expenses when she turns 19. Mr. Ezra here will manage it until then." Mom's posture changed at these words. She sat up straighter, her eyes widening slightly. I noticed her hands, usually fidgety with anxiety, grow still in her lap. "The money can only be accessed for educational purposes, and Charlotte will have full control of it when she turns 19. Mr. Ezra added, stepping forward with some papers. "Mrs. Eleanor has been very specific about these terms." I sat there swinging my legs back and forth, more interested in the pattern of the wallpaper than in what they were discussing. College seemed like something from another lifetime. I was more concerned about my upcoming spelling test and whether Jenny Martinez would invite me to her birthday party. "Everything is arranged," Sarah, Grandma said, reaching for Mom's hand for once. Mom didn't pull away. I want to make sure my granddaughter has opportunities regardless of everything else. The unspoken mention of Dad hung in the air between them. After signing some papers and saying our goodbyes, Mom and I drove home in silence. But this silence felt different from our usual tense quiet. It was almost peaceful. As we pulled into our driveway, Mom turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. "Well," she said, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. "It seems at least one person in your father's family turned out to be decent after all." I didn't fully grasp the significance of that day until much later, at 8 years old. All I knew was that Grandma Eleanor had done something nice for me, and for once Mom wasn't angry about it. The concept of college money meant nothing to me. Then I was more excited about the butterscotch candy. Grandma had slipped into my pocket when we left. Grandma Eleanor passed away just a few weeks after our last visit. The funeral was small and quiet, and I noticed Mom actually shed a few tears. Though she tried to hide them with Grandma, it felt like the last bridge to my father's world had crumbled away. Life moved on as it always does. Over the next few years, Mom started dating a guy named Jacob. He seemed nice enough. He had a good job at a bank, drove a nice car, and always brought me small gifts. When he came to visit, Mom smiled more when he was around, and I hadn't seen her smile like that in years. Then they decided to get married. I was 10 at the time, and the prospect of having a complete family again made my heart flutter with excitement. But the real news came when Mom told me Jacob had a daughter my age named Ashley who would be moving in with us. I remember jumping up and down my mind, filled with visions of sharing secrets, having sleepovers in the same room, and finally having someone to play with who wasn't just a school friend. After years of being an only child in a broken home, the idea of having a sister seemed like a dream come true. The day they moved in, I had decorated our shared room with welcome signs and laid out some of my favorite books and toys to share. Ashley walked in, took one look around, and asked her dad if she could have her own room instead. "I don't want to share with her," she said, not even bothering to lower her voice. "She's not really my sister." That was just the beginning. Ashley quickly staked her claim on Mom's attention. She'd curl up next to her on the couch during movie nights, pushing me to the side. She started calling Mom Mommy within the first week, and Mom's face would light up every time she did. "Mom, want to see my art project?" I'd ask, holding up my drawing in a minute. "Honey," Mom would reply, but that minute never came because Ashley would already be showing Mom her homework or telling her about her day. When I finally broke down and told Mom how I felt, her response cut deep. "Don't be selfish, Charlotte," she said, barely looking up from helping Ashley with her homework. "Ashley lost her mother when she was very young. She needs extra attention and a woman's love. You should understand that, but what about my love?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I just nodded and retreated to my newly silent room where Ashley's empty bed served as a constant reminder that I wasn't enough, not for my father, and now it seemed not for my mother either. The changes in our family happened so gradually that at first I barely noticed them. But looking back, now I can see how each small moment added up to create an ever-widening gap between me and my mother. It started with shopping trips. Mom would come home with bags full of designer clothes for Ashley, fancy jeans, brand-name sneakers, cute tops from expensive stores. Meanwhile, I got my clothes from department store sales and discount outlets. "Ashley needs to maintain a certain appearance at her new school," Mom would say when I pointed out the difference. "Besides, you're not as interested in fashion as she is." Then came the biggest bombshell: they were sending Ashley to Riverside Prep, the expensive private school across town. I still remember the day they announced it over dinner. "Ashley's test scores are exceptional," Jacob said proudly. "She needs a more challenging academic environment." "What about me?" I asked, pushing my peas around my plate. "Could I go to Riverside too?" Mom and Jacob exchanged that look. I'd come to hate the one that meant they'd already discussed this without me. "Honey, you're doing fine at Lincoln Public." Mom said Ashley has different needs. "She's really gifted. You know, the regular program suits you better." That night, I cried into my pillow until I had no tears left. But something changed in me after that. As the years passed, I stopped trying to compete for Mom's attention. I stopped showing her my report cards, stopped telling her about my achievements, stopped hoping she'd notice me. By 15, I'd accepted my place in the family hierarchy. I threw myself into my studies at Lincoln Public, not for them, but for myself. I joined the debate team, competed in science fairs, and maintained straight as my teachers would write glowing comments on my papers. "Exceptional analysis, Charlotte, outstanding work." You have a bright future ahead. Meanwhile, at-home dinner conversations revolved around Ashley's latest achievements at Riverside Prep, her participation in the Model UN conference, her selection for the Advanced Placement Program, her tennis tournaments against other private schools. Ashley's English teacher says she has real potential as a writer, Mom would gush. She gets straight A's without even trying. Jacob would add proudly. I'd sit there quietly, eating my dinner, thinking about my own straight days, about how I just won first place in the regional science fair, about how my debate team coach wanted me to lead the team next year. But I kept these thoughts to myself. What was the point of sharing them? My achievements at a public school couldn't possibly compare to Ashley's private school accomplishments, at least not in their eyes. Still, there were moments like when Mom and Jacob would attend every single one of Ashley's tennis matches but couldn't make it to my debate team finals, that the old hurt would surface, but I'd learned to push it down to focus on what I could control. I had my education, my goals, and thanks to Grandma Eleanor's foresight, I had a future that was mine alone. Senior year flew by, an AW whirlwind of college applications and scholarship essays. As graduation approached, I found myself sitting at my desk late into the night, surrounded by brochures from different universities. My grades had opened up a lot of possibilities. I was particularly excited about State University's full scholarship program and had already been pre-approved based on my academic record. You don't have to take the scholarship route, you know? My guidance counselor, Mrs. Martinez, had told me, with your grandmother's college fund, you could attend any school you want, but I had bigger plans for that money. I want to be smart about it, I explained to her. If I can get a full scholarship, I can save the fund for a down payment on a house after graduation. Mrs. Martinez had smiled at that. Always thinking ahead, aren't you, Charlotte? The weeks before my 19th birthday, Mom called me down for what she termed a family meeting. I found them all sitting in the living room. Mom perched nervously on the edge of her favorite armchair, Jacob looking serious on the couch, and Ashley beside him, not quite meeting my eyes. Sit down, Charlotte, Mom said, patting the OTL Fian across from her. We need to discuss something important. I sat, noting how formal everything felt. Usually family discussions happen over dinner or in passing. Never with this kind of setup. As you know, Mom began, Ashley is graduating this year too. She paused, glancing at my stepsister. We've been looking at colleges. I got accepted to Princeton. Ashley interrupted, finally looking at me. It's my dream school. That's congratulations, I said, not sure why this required a family meeting. The thing is, Jacob jumped in. Even with Ashley's excellent education at Riverside Prep, her grades don't quite qualify her for a full scholarship. Mom leaned forward. We've spent so much on her private school education, and it's been worth every penny. But we just don't have the resources for Princeton's tuition. I sat there, still not understanding why they were telling me this. Then Mom dropped the bomb. We were hoping, since you have your grandmother's college fund, you might be willing to share it with Ashley. The room went silent. I stared at Mom, waiting for her to say she was joking. But her face remained serious, expectant even. Share my college fund, I repeated slowly, the one Grandma Eleanor set up specifically for my education. You're getting a full scholarship anyway, Ashley said. As if this justified everything. You don't even need the money. We're family, Mom added. Softly, family helps each other. I sat there feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. The college fund, my safety net, my future, my grandmother's last gift to me. They wanted me to hand it over to Ashley, the same Ashley who'd spent years making sure I knew I wasn't really family. The same Ashley who got everything while I got the leftovers. No. The word came out of my mouth before I could even process the full weight of what they were asking. Absolutely not. What do you mean? No. Mom's voice took on that sharp edge. I'd grown to know so well. I mean, no. This money was left to me by my grandmother. It's mine, and I'm going to use it for my future. Jacob's face turned red. Do you hear how selfish she sounds? Sarah, this is exactly what I've been talking about for years. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. Selfish? That's rich coming from you guys. Watch your tone. Young lady, Jacob snapped. You've always been jealous of Ashley, always trying to compete with her, and now you're taking your revenge by denying her a chance at a good education. The absurdity of his statement made me laugh again, though there was no humor in it. Jealous of what exactly? Of how you've given her everything while treating me like an afterthought. And by the way, If she's as brilliant as you've always claimed, why didn't she earn a scholarship like I did? Ashley's face crumpled, and tears started streaming down her cheeks. She jumped up from the couch and ran upstairs, her dramatic exit punctuated by the slamming of her bedroom door. How dare you? Mom's voice was quiet, dangerous. How dare you be so cruel? Cruel, I'm being cruel. I stood up, my hands shaking. You're the ones trying to take away my college fund. Mom stood too, her face hard. Well then, let me make this very clear. You have the weeks until your birthday to change your mind. If you don't agree to share that money with your sister, you can find somewhere else to live. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. What, you're kicking me out? This is my house too. No. Charlotte, it's not. Mom's voice was cold. This house is in my name. You'll be 19, an adult. I'm not legally obligated to support you anymore. I can't believe this. I whispered. I can't believe you're choosing her over me again. You're choosing money over family. Jacob shot back, family. I practically spat the word. When have you ever treated me like family? They had no answer for that. Instead, Mom just said, the weeks. Charlotte, think carefully about your choice. The next 3 days were like living in a ghost town where I was the only ghost. No one spoke to me at breakfast. My questions at dinner were met with silence. Ashley acted like I was invisible, and Mom and Jacob treated me like an unwelcome house guest who had overstayed their welcome. I ate my meals in my room, spent my free time at the library, and tried to make myself as scarce as possible. But every night, lying in my bed, I could hear them in the living room, talking, laughing, watching LED TV together, a happy family of 3 with no room for a fourth. 4 days after that disastrous family meeting, I called Mr. Ezra, my grandmother's lawyer. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number, but his warm, familiar voice helped calm my nerves. Charlotte, I was just thinking about you. Your 19th birthday is coming up soon. Yes, Mr. Ezra. That's actually why I'm calling. I took a deep breath and told him everything. The demand for money, the ultimatum, all of it. He listened quietly until I finished, then cleared his throat. Those funds are legally yours to control the moment you turn 19, Charlotte. Your grandmother was very specific about that, and frankly, I think she suspected something like this might happen someday. What do you mean? Let's just say she knew her son's ex-wife very well. He paused. Now about your living situation. Look, here's what I suggest. Pick your college first, preferably one in a different city, then find an apartment nearby. I can help you with the paperwork. You won't be able to access the funds until your birthday, but we can get everything set up in advance. I spent that afternoon researching apartments near State University, where I'd already been accepted with a full scholarship. By evening, I'd found a small but decent place, just a 10-minute walk from campus. The landlord, Mrs. Chun, was willing to hold it for me with just a promise of payment. On my birthday for the next week, I quietly packed my life into boxes, one small piece at a time. I didn't want anyone to notice what I was doing. Each night after everyone was asleep, I'd pack another box and hide it in my closet. Photos, books, clothes. My life condensed into cardboard containers. On the morning of my 19th birthday, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. Well, she asked, arms crossed. Have you made your decision? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt strangely calm. Yes. I have. The answer is still no. Then you know what that means. Her voice was hard. I want you out of this house today. Okay. I said simply. I think my calm acceptance threw her off. She probably expected tears or begging. Instead, I went upstairs, got my pre-packed boxes, and called the taxi I'd scheduled the day before. 20 minutes later, I was turning the key in the lock of my new apartment. The first thing I did was call Mr. Ezra, who had all the paperwork ready. By noon, I had access to my grandmother's fund. By 1 o'clock, I paid my first month's rent and security deposit to Mrs. Chin. That afternoon, I walked to the local coffee shop where I'd applied for a job the week before. The manager, Mike, had already agreed to hire me for the summer before college started. My apartment was small, just a studio with a kitchenette. But it was mine that night, as I sat on my newly purchased air mattress, eating takeout and watching the sunset through my single window. I felt something unexpected. Freedom. The weeks into my new life. I was scrolling through Facebook during my coffee shop break when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Friends from high school were messaging me. Have you seen your mom's post? Are you okay? What's going on with shaking hands? I pulled up Mom's page, and there was a long dramatic post about ungrateful children and family loyalty. "My daughter has broken our hearts," she wrote. "After everything we've done for her, she selfishly refused to help her sister get a college education. Instead, she's hoarding money from her grandmother while her sister's dreams are put on hold. I never thought I'd raise such a selfish, heartless child." The comments below were worse. Relatives I barely knew were chiming in. How could she be so ungrateful? Family should come first. What a spoiled brat. I sat there in the break room, my coffee getting cold as anger and hurt battled inside me. Then something snapped. If Mom wanted to air our dirty laundry on social media, fine, let's tell the whole story. I opened my laptop and started typing. Since my mother has chosen to make our private family matters public, let me share my side of the story. Yes, I refused to give my stepsister my college fund money that my grandmother specifically left for my education. What my mother forgot to mention is that she gave me an ultimatum: either give up my inheritance or get kicked out of the house on my 19th birthday. She followed through on that threat. I was forced to move out because I wouldn't give away money that legally belonged to me. For years I watched as my stepsister got private school education. While I went to public school, I watched as she got expensive clothes while I got department store leftovers. I worked hard, got straight A, and earned a full scholarship to college, something I'm proud of. But apparently that wasn't enough. They wanted my inheritance too. So yes, I chose to keep my grandmother's gift to me. And yes, I'm now living on my own, working and preparing for college. But I didn't choose this situation. My mother did when she kicked her own daughter out on her birthday. I hit post and went back to work. By the time my shift ended, the response was overwhelming. Former teachers, neighbors, even some of Mom's old friends were commenting with messages of support. People who'd known our family for years started sharing stories of how they'd noticed the favoritism, but never said anything. My phone rang that evening. Mom's name flashed on the screen. "How dare you?" she hissed when I answered. "Do you know how humiliating this is? Mrs. Ezra from church won't even look at me anymore. Half my friends are questioning my parenting." "Maybe they should," I said calmly. "You kicked your daughter out for not giving away her inheritance. What kind of parent does that? I did everything for you." "No, Mom, you did everything for Ashley, and that's fine. She's your daughter now, but I'm done. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up and blocked her number. Then I blocked her on all social media along with Jacob and Ashley. It was surprisingly easy, like cutting away dead weight I'd been carrying for years. Now I'm in my first semester at State University, studying business management. My small apartment feels more like home every day. Sometimes I think about them, Mom, Jacob and Ashley, but those thoughts come less and less often. Grandma, Eleanor's picture sits on my desk, and sometimes I swear she's smiling at me with pride. She knew somehow that I'd need this money not just for education but for freedom. She gave me the means to choose my own path, and I'll never forget that. If you enjoyed this suspenseful story and want to hear more, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more thrilling content. Your support means a lot and helps me create more captivating stories for you. Thank you for being part of this journey.